All right, folks. So today's little vlog, documentary vlog segment is going to be about a trust. Now, this trust is something that my mother started with me in mind when I was a youngster, and she was going through a very difficult bout of cancer that she was wondering whether or not she would be able to pull through. Thank goodness she did pull through it. She's with us here today. Um, but unfortunately, there is a little bit of a curse with this trust, and it kind of goes as follows. And so, um, she was uh, my sweet mother had been through so much and done so much in her time so far, and that includes raising four kids on her own for the most part. It includes getting a PhD, and it includes traveling the world as a scientist. And so she did a lot for her career, and she did a lot for her family. Um, and, you know, just a matter of chance and a matter of how much, stress she put herself under to give us a good life. She happened to get a cancer diagnosis, and it hit all of us very hard, but she was very strong and she pulled through it, all the while taking care of us, all the while still putting us through our many, many years of school, primary, middle, secondary, post-secondary education as well. And so she's a fighter, and uh, she kicked it, and that's pretty cool. But this trust has been a little bit of a curse because while she intended for it originally to be there for me, forbid she wasn't able to pull through her health issues. Unfortunately, as she got older and as her health was a little more and more affected by her experience with cancer, she kind of started twisting this trust into something that she didn't intend. Because naturally, you know, nobody is impervious to time, and time does a number on all of us, and everybody changes with time, and people can be completely different one day to the next. But in her case, it was a matter of years, it was a matter of working through health conditions, and eventually, the way she saw this money sitting there just wasn't the same. And instead of it being a safety net, it became her tool for spying on me. Me specifically, because I'm the youngest in the family, and the other kiddos had already graduated at that point, and I was still in the throes of going to college and figuring out what I wanted to do in my life. And she would use that to pay private investigators. She would attempt to bribe my friend circles, um, and it got really uncomfortable. I found out that that was happening with a couple of my friends, and I was like, hey, could you please cut that out? Like, she's not well. It's not very cool. Um, Even if she came to you with this notion of what she wanted to do, I've made it very clear to you before, and I'm making it clear to you now. She's been through a lot in her health, and so this isn't, uh, somebody who is 100% aware of the social consequences of their actions. And so she would do her little spying, and I would have to interrupt it and be like, "Hey, dude, can you not play along with her? I'm very aware of it. In fact, I'm acutely aware of it. I've been dealing with it for a while now." And so that would affect individual friends. That would affect entire friend circles. And I would have to ask them to cut it out. I would have to ask them to leave it. And sometimes they listened, and cool, we would stay friends. And sometimes they wouldn't listen, and I would just have to move on because when you're somebody's job instead of their friend, obviously the dynamic is different, and um, it's just not as natural. It's not comfortable. It's just too fake. And I have very little interest in having a fake friend or having somebody that's convinced to be my, babysitter of sorts. Um, and funny enough, a person that tried to convince themselves they were my babysitter is somebody who I, in fact, was babysitting. And that individual's name is Ul-Haq, and uh, I have a few segments on him and all the troubles that I dealt with him and his disability and what dealing with his disability entails. Whereas he attempts to speculate about what disabilities I have and how unwell I am. And his parents had me report to a doctor's office at ASU to put in a little report that I was dealing with such and such potential mental health issues. And I went over that a little in another video, but I'll recap it because it's actually very important to understand, and it ties into this very much. So Saif ul Haq's parents, talked to me one day when I was leaving Safe's place, and they're like, "Look, our son has microcephaly. He suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome. I'm gonna need you to. It would be really cool if you could take care of him. While you hang out with him, it would be really nice if you took care of him. One thing he struggles with is keeping good friends, right? He likes to have best buddies, and he's not very good at keeping just like normal friendships. And so we need you to be a best friend of his. We need him to be able to talk to you about his health condition. That's a really good way to break the ice of something that he feels is the most personal to him and he struggles with on a day-to-day basis, and he doesn't necessarily have somebody he can completely trust with that. And so we'd like you to help us uh, help him by being a good actor. And I did exactly what they wanted and what they asked, and one of those things entailed going to the mental health office at ASU and uh, look, I'm a gigantic nerd. Let's say I have Asperger's or autism, so that I could, look like somebody relatable to him. Um, and so I went to them and I got, just so I could get documentation because he's had people, try to act as his friends before, but he kind of caught on. And now he was like very cautious about who he talked to about his mental health because he didn't want to feel like he was being interrogated. Um, and little did he know, his parents were very involved in his life to the extent that his own bedroom was bugged. So, anyways, I went to the doctor's office. I went boohoo, this and that. And they gave me a little paper that said, okay, well, Mo feels like this. And Saif ul-Haq's parents were very happy about that. They were like, awesome, now you can go talk to him. Now you can tell him this and that. This is how you feel. And his mother had like a very big presence on the ASU campus. To be honest, I'm not sure why. I didn't really care. It's like she was a student there or something. But, so she was around and she was able to talk to me and talk to all his other friends and kind of coordinate, what his college life was going to look like. And one of the things that I did is I would constantly visit his dorm, like later on in the evenings when I was done with my classes. We would kick it, and I'd help him find better activities to do instead of just drink and smoke himself to boredom. We'd at least play video games. We'd at least walk to the corner store around the corner, things like that. And so yeah, I gave him company. We would sit down. I would pretend to have heart-to-heart talks. I just look up symptoms on Google and be like, oh, sometimes I don't understand social rules because my mental health condition. And he'd be like, well, sometimes I just don't understand how things work and I always feel confused. And, people treat me like I'm stupid and my dad clearly doesn't love me. And he doesn't think I could be successful like him. And all I want to do is be more successful than my dad so I can really show him. And he just really opened up to me. And his parents loved it, because he would also talk about his health condition and, besides personal drama that was bothering him that his parents would try to mediate, he would also discuss his own health issues. And so, anyways, the reason I mention that is because later on down the road, Saif Ul-Haq and his parents try to leverage the fact that they had me go to a health clinic and say this and that, uh, boohoo, I potentially have Asperger's or autism or whatever. And so they tried to leverage that information against me, whereas they themselves put me up to that task. And so uh, later on down the road, when it became very clear that Saif Ul-Haq was siphoning off my trust finances, when it became very clear to me that my roommates were doing the same thing, um, it, and when later on down the road, when Saif Ul-Haq started pointing firearms at me and telling me how he's going to rob me of my security clearance compensation and how I'm his bitch and how I own nothing and how he's super wealthy, when that all comes to about, um, he basically lets me know that because his family tricked me into admitting that I have such and such mental health condition, they're gonna go ahead and use that to their advantage and easily able to put me under a conservatorship. And so he's gonna say we're gonna say you have ADHD because you like to drink coffee. We're gonna say you have autism because you're a nerd, and like you're super awkward, which is very much not true. I mean, if anything, he's the person that stayed home when we would go clubbing. But anyways, that's besides the point. The point is this trust that my mother had started, uh, with good intentions in mind, was being used, and it was being used by people that very much knew that she was a little bit disadvantaged with respects to um, uh, her competence in, the American social function, and how that basically just like was really weird, and she was basically effectively helping them paint a narrative. Now, I thought my mom was just being awkward, but it turns out Saif ul Haq and his family were putting her up to this task and saying, look, we're going to pay you a ton of money. It's a bit of a long story, but we know how to get some money from the government as long as you say such and you do such and such with your trust. And so they wanted an investment in their embezzlement scheme, and they said, well, she has a trust. Why doesn't she invest that trust in us? Every time my son lives with her son, I will pay my son and say that he's taking care of her son, right? Every time they go to an event, we'll have the trust pay for it. And some the other roommates that I had before I had ever lived with Saif Ul-Haq would do the same thing. Uh, Danielle Olson and Jacqueline Braden, Joshua Rodriguez, they'd go ahead and pay themselves. And Jacqueline Braden actually admitted, she's like, "Oh yeah, I pay myself hundreds of dollars out of that thing that your mother came to us with. As a matter of fact, I charged your trust like $300 just for photographs." And so not only was the trust being used as some sort of investment into their embezzlement, but that trust was also being embezzled by the people that were temporarily put in charge of it, right? They just saw a huge number in a bank account and they came up with any excuses they could to rob me. And it's not like I was best buddies with these folks. I mean, part of the reason that I would visit Jacqueline, part of the reason I would visit Josh, is because they let me know that they were autistic and they needed somebody to hang out with them and take care of them. And they let me know that a lot of their other friends did not enjoy hanging out with them one on one. And I kind of understood why. I mean, they would bicker a lot about their relationship and, make snide remarks about each other behind each other's backs. And it kind of felt like I was like towing this line and like hanging out between two people that just weren't very comfortable with each other. But anyways, as you can see, this trust that was originally started by an ill woman who was just not doing super well was being taken advantage of by some not so cool people that were very glad to take advantage of that woman. And one of those people was Garrett Myers, definitely a miser. We had jokes about how big of a miser he was. I mean, living with him was kind of hell because if you buy groceries, you split the bill, but he would always want to split the bill in a way that he was at some sort of advantage. And I just hated dealing with him when it came with money. So I came up with ground rules. I was like, look, I'm just not going to share food with you. I'm not going to share drinks with you. Just buy your own shit. And, we each pay our own rent. And I'll never have money issues with you again. And, I think I was the only person that did that. Everybody else in the house was like constantly having kitchen discussions with him about how they're going to split the bills. And it was just awful. It's like, it's a six pack of beer and it's some groceries in the fridge. You don't have to turn it into this whole thing, but they did, And so I'm glad I moved past that. But Garrett Myers, the miser, and there were some inappropriate jokes about his religious background, and how it just wasn't a good look on him. But thankfully, those were just jokes. And at that point in time, we were all close enough where we would just like take jabs at each other, but in a friendly kind of a way. There were some moments where things just started becoming heated and started becoming angry and just started becoming like straight up bullying. Like it was only one person getting bagged on, and it was only one person that was the outlier. And so it wasn't all friendly jabs. At one point, I became the bullied person, the only person that didn't work in intelligence, And, but anyways, yeah. So everybody was in on this effort of robbing me of a trust by claiming that I was some sort of special fella, when in fact there is no actual diagnosis of me having anything wrong with me at all, or me needing them to take care of me. And so that trust that was built to attempt to take care of the youngest, that might have been left behind forbid my mother kicked the bucket. Uh, that trust that was built for that very reason was being used against me, really. I mean, these folks were really rude to me. They basically just saw me as a money bag. My mother was tricked into investing with Saif Ul-Haq and his family into an embezzlement scheme, which I doubt my mother knew had any illegal effects. And so it was just this whole bad thing. It's not like I directly benefited from it at all. It's not like it paid me out, some sort of stipend. It's not like it ever bought me a car or a meal or anything. Like it was just going to the people around me towards their effort to fuck me over. And so that's the gist of the trust, really. I mean, that's what it was. That's what it is, and that's how the Ul-Haq family tried to use it against me, and very much did. I mean, when I lived with Saif, that guy was always up to nothing. I mean, I literally would go to work, go to school, come back home. He's just sitting there smoking weed and playing video games. I mean, um, the moments when he left the house and he went to, his office at Western Window Systems, or his office at Fox News or whatever, Southwest. He had a lot of friend businesses that he was involved in because he worked in intelligence, and there's a big intelligence community back home, and those folks basically had a compound of businesses that worked together to self-sustain their their effort of basically making as much money as possible. So that's that. I eventually realized, okay, like this trust has not been benefiting me at all. In fact, it's being used against me. When Saif Ul-Haq would get really angry, he would brag that I'm his bitch and I have nothing, and he's paying himself whatever he wants to live just because he lives with me. Um, he's like, I don't even need a job, and in fact, he kind of, I guess, didn't. I mean, he just lived at home, always ordering takeout and stuff. And so it was all pretty gross, right? And so that whole thing has been pretty gross, and it very much ties into the Ul-Haq family and their effort to embezzle a ton of money by uh, uh, investigating me for a security clearance, uh, withholding that security clearance from me until they can try to put me under some sort of conservatorship so that they can siphon all the security clearance money that I'm owed right out from under me. And And not only do they intend on robbing me in the future of that security clearance compensation, they also have been attempting to rob me of my sexual assault compensation. And that's that. I had a small concussion during my sexual assault, and Joshua Rodriguez and his mother uh, and his father, tried to conspire against me to uh, win over some more trust money from me by saying, "Oh, we'll look out for you since you have these temporary seizures." "Oh, we'll look out for you because of this and that," and they tried to make me out to be like uh, weak and unpowered because I just had a small issue with the folks at the military. They wanted to try to claim that I wasn't handling it well and that they were looking after me. But if anything, to this day, those folks keep harassing me. I mean, I swear to you, I was driving through New Mexico making food deliveries, and Joshua Rodriguez and his mother were sitting there in the Chipotle, uh, basically ambushing me. And I have photographs of Joshua Rodriguez doing exactly that, just ambushing me to try to rob me. Um, and and the way they would go about that is by taking photographs nearby me and saying, "Oh, look, see, we're friends. Oh, we're looking after him because on such and such day he had a seizure. Therefore, we need to look after him." But in reality, they never saw such a free ride as that trust, right? I mean, they entitled to take whatever money out of it as they want. They have a literally clinically retarded individual, Saif Ul-Haq, who's taking charge of that, who's also taking charge of the embezzlement effort. And so I guess this video is about part of the funding that they get towards their part of the income they get towards their criminal effort. I mean, they'll have so many people stalk me, so many people that I grew up with will get paid off to do inappropriate things, to do wrong things nearby me, to try to pose as if we're close friends, just so they can further their criminal effort. And the funding comes from where? Not only their own pockets, because it's a worthwhile investment if you could rob a few $100 billion just by investing a few $1 million. So not only is that investment coming from their pocket, but it's also coming from a trust that they were able to trick my sweet mother into involving them and trusting them with. And so yeah, that's that. That's a little brief about Saif ul Haq, me having to pretend to be special needs so that his parents can hear all about his struggles while we uh, kicked it at his place in college. You heard a little bit about how some of the other roommates I've had have also been siphoning those kinds of finances. You've heard about how Jacqueline Braden bragged about, basically charging for hangouts and stuff. You heard about how she bragged about charging for photographs. She charged at one point. Jacqueline Braden said she charged the trust $300 because fuck it, why not? And at that point in me visiting them and taking care of them, at that point I was gleaning as much information as I could about what kind of criminal shit they were up to, and that might just be one of them. And yeah, so that's that. Thanks for tuning in to this segment about the really weird trusts, the untrustworthy trusts, the financial trusts that these people are using, effectively robbing my mother of, a cancer survivor. Um, and and I guess you could say robbing me of it. I never like to feel entitled to family finances. I like to do my own thing, but she made that thing with me in mind. Uh, I don't like to think about god awful things like inheritance and stuff. And that's not what I mean when I say it kind of is robbing me. What I really mean is that she put that thing together with me in mind, and these other folks are coming up with false narratives about me not being able to care for myself, me having such and such undiagnosed mental health issues. Like they'll just make shit up and be like, and for this reason, we should look after him and steal money. And for this reason, we should charge $300 for photographs. And so I just figured I'd tune in and let you guys know where some of this funding is coming from. So they're very unscrupulous with their criminal effort, and this is one of those very unscrupulous kind of things that they do. Is they straight up reach their hand into my bank account, pull some money out, and Saif Ul-Haq would go buy himself super expensive weed, some primo weed. He would go to dispensaries and just buy himself some expensive high-end shit that comes in a glass display jar. So that's what he would do, trust money. And then you have folks like Jacqueline Braden that would not only pocket the money, but with me, being their little, I'm looking out for you folks because you're autistic and your relationship is barely hanging on together without some sort of coach. Me being that person that was there for them, she trusted me enough to say, well, look, this is how much money we're basically just fucking snatching. And I think it's interesting. I think it's funny. You have folks like Danielle Olson. She would just throw alcohol benders in her backyard and invite me over, and she was charging for that. Like, where did this tequila bottle come from? Where did all these red Solo cups come from? Where did all this beer come from? The trust. And so the trust was not some sort of trust fund at all. It is more so has been a vessel for folks that work with adjudicating a security clearance for the government to reach into and benefit themselves from. And clearly, there is a huge conflict of interest there, right? When somebody's able to rob the person whose security clearance they're investigating of their trust, when that person is able to transfer those trust finances in a certain way to where they can, pay for an illegal campaign to try to rob you of your security clearance compensation, there's a huge conflict of interest there. The person that is investigating your security clearance should not also have financial benefit by ruining your life, because that security clearance investigation process and the powers that come with it are very vast. So when you have somebody like Danielle Olson, who's a military officer, crossing those lines, it's very disappointing. When you have somebody like Jacqueline Braden, who's a military officer, crossing those kinds of lines, it's very disappointing. When you have somebody like Garrett Myers, who's an Air Force officer, and he's crossing those lines, and he has a history of not being so good with money, there's a huge problem there. I mean, the guy's trusted to fly an F-16, but he can't go a day without committing crime and without playing the blame game when he gets caught, right? And so, yeah, and it goes on, and it all traces back to the Ul-Haq family and their effort to use me, to lie to me about pretending to be a caretaker for their son, while what they really did was record as much footage and try to use it against me as some sort of self-diagnosis so that they could rob me and attempt to put me under a conservatorship. And when I move in with their son to take care of him and literally do dishes for him and clean his toilets and stuff, what they wanted to do is turn around and say, oh, well, my son has been living with you and taking care of you, and therefore he should be pulling money out of your trust to go buy his high-end weed and his daily takeout food. Um, and clearly the conflicts of interests are very much peppered in there. They're all over the place, and you'd run out of bullet points chasing them all down. But it just tells you about the character of these people and the people involved in my life. It tells you a little bit about Saif Ul-Haq. It tells you a little bit about his wife, Violet, aka Viola Ul-Haq. It tells you a lot about Sayaf Abdullah, a former employer whose attempts to make my employment difficult and claim that I'm unemployable so that he could try to rob me of my security clearance compensation. He has also made multiple attempts on my life because he has lost so much money in this investment because it turns out that Saif Ul-Haq's assessment was wrong. The special needs kid, his assessment was wrong, and I'm not special needs. like, I can't make this stuff up. It's all very real, and I'm very much dealing with it. It's why I have to document it, real time or after the fact, because it's all very absurd and it's all just so shitty that you want to wish it wasn't true. But this is a gaggle of very shitty people, and they think they're getting good PR for being good at attempting to rob somebody of their security clearance. But the fact of the matter is, they stepped on their dicks every step of the way. They gave themselves out every step of the way. They shit the bed in moments where they could have gotten away with it. And so that's my little segment about the bed shitters and the financial trust. Thank you. So it's worth noting that these issues didn't stop towards the end of my time living in Chandler, Arizona. When I was living with Saif Ul-Haq, these issues of the trust embezzlement didn't end there. My own sister, Noor, would also siphon off some money from there, and she would claim, oh, well, I'm taking care of my brother. But in reality, she was inviting me over for meals, like weekly. And I just think, if you want some money from me, just ask, because I had money in the bank at the time, If she wanted money from me, she could have just asked. But instead, she was using some trust that was made out of thin air without my permission. And I'm very well to do and well spoken and able to care for myself, right? It's not like I have fetal alcohol syndrome like the person that I was taking care of. And so my own sister was actually taking advantage of that and siphoning off finances and giving herself a salary, the whole 9 yards. And that was during my time of living with Saif Ul-Haq, right? Like I would go visit her, and she was in on the grift as well. And towards the end of my time living with Saif Ul-Haq in Chandler, at 3459 North Apache Court, after he started pointing loaded weapons at me, after I got a restraining order, and I was like, I have a restraining order against this guy. He's no longer allowed to live in this house. I came here to take care of him because he suffers from microcephaly and fetal alcohol syndrome, and he's effectively clinically retarded. And his community wanted me to care for him. They came and vouched for me. His parents wanted me to care for him. They came and vouched for me. At one point, I realized, I was like, I just got a restraining order against this guy for pointing loaded firearms at me that he had access to for some reason. Being that he's special needs, he probably shouldn't. I don't know if you know this, but people with fetal alcohol syndrome, they're inclined to have bouts of extreme anger. Like they get angry very easily, and they get explosive when they're angry, and they're predisposed to that. And this guy had firearms in the house, and he was pointing them at me when he got angry, just to tell me that he was robbing me of my trust. His parents had me set up and cornered, and they were going to make me look like a retard. My own family was in on it because they were told that they were going to get paid millions. And so I was hoping that all that would stop in Arizona. I figured it would stop in Chandler, where Saif lived. I figured it would stop in Gilbert, where my sister and her husband lived. Her husband being the son of the general of war games. And so, I was hoping it would stop there, but, I got a tech job over in California. My brother's like, okay, me and my in-laws, we're gonna set you up for success. And so I moved there, And I immediately start apartment hunting, right? Because I got the job basically immediately. They hired me on at their company, Tests Assured, and they would always wear disguises while on the phone calls, and they would try to hide their identities. But it was very obvious that it was that it was my in-laws running the company. My brother just told me that at the time he told me it was friends of his, right? But they would hide their identities. They would try to pretend that it wasn't them during the video conferences and during the interview phone calls, the stages of the interviews, the different people that would interview me, right? They would wear disguises and they would try to pretend they weren't who they are. They would always be wearing masks. And so, I played along. I wanted a tech job. I was like, cool. I'd love to work in this industry. I've always wanted to serve in the best capacity that I can, and a great way to serve the community is to be involved with companies that do great work, right? And so I was very interested in working with Facebook. I was very interested in working for this company named Tests Assured that did work for Facebook. They did quality assurance testing of the products that Facebook gave out. And they let me know that they were in touch with Mark Zuckerberg, and they had the prototypes for the Oculus and the unreleased versions, and they let me know that they're working on a little watch, that hadn't been released yet, and so they gave me all this info, and they let me in on this company, and they were, you know, setting me up to start, with the company, and the 1 month onboarding process. I mean, I watched all the Facebook videos, the Facebook contractor videos. I did that 1 week of training, the onboarding training. I did all that, and then they started stirring shit up. They started saying, "Well, hey, you didn't send your direct deposit info. You need to do that to get all signed up." And I was like, "Oh, actually, I have record of it on my computer. I did send it. Is there something wrong with the website? Is there some better way I can get you my personal information? It's really important that I get paid. I depend on my paychecks, right? I haven't been with the company that long. I just moved to a new place. Expenses have been high. Uh, my brother let me crash at his place for a few days, and then he was like, "Okay, I'm going to put you up in a hotel." I was like, "Actually, instead of paying for a hotel for a whole month, uh, why don't I just get an apartment instead?" And they didn't seem very interested in letting me get an apartment for a lower price per month, right? They wanted me to blow my cash on a hotel for an entire huge period of time, and I just couldn't afford it. I was like, I literally can't afford to do that. I can't just be living in a hotel, literally. And they were like, "Oh, well, Facebook will compensate you for it. That's what these companies do when they bring you out for an interview, and when they bring you out to a new place, they pay for things like that." And so I was like, "Okay, but for the first little while, I just need you to help pay for it, and that way I'm not strung along, because I haven't even gotten my first paycheck yet. I need to make sure this job is a sure thing." And they agreed. And as it turned out, as I was really worried about, as I was being cautious about, it turned out that I was not going to be receiving my first paycheck that I was very much needing, right? And so, uh, you, it's like they put on this whole show. They take us to the park to play with their kids every once in a while. We'd shoot hoops, play basketball. Uh, his wife would cook all these extravagant meals. And it's like, hey, like, this isn't a wedding. You don't have to cook all these fancy things. Like, it's not like I asked for it. It's not like I needed it to sustain myself or get by. Um, it's not like the issues that I had in Arizona, I was expecting them to carry over, right? At the time, besides seeing Saif Ul-Haq, who was stalking me at the mosque very frequently, as far as I knew, those issues of siphoning my finances, and those issues of being stalked, and those issues of having firearms pointed at me, it felt like that was over. I thought Saif Ul-Haq was showing up to the mosque every time my brother was there because he was trying to reform himself, and because he was trying to show that he was apologetic to me. But just like the folks at Test Assured, he was wearing a disguise. Well, it turns out my brother, just like the rest of my folks, was very much involved in attempting to siphon off my finances. And, he was very much involved in trying to set me up for failure and to rob me of my security clearance. Not only that, but he was trying to overturn the restraining order that I had against Saif Ul-Haq. And his wife was a part of that. It was really weird. I mean, I would do my laundry. We would all be sitting in the living room downstairs watching TV. They would go upstairs to the laundry room and steal one of my socks from me. It's like, what the heck? And so, yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I've been dealing with. And I had to add this addendum to my previous video because I wanted it to be clear that although, the same way I love my mother, but I can't trust her, the same thing goes for my brother living over in the Bay Area in California. I mean, although I might have love for him, he is not trustworthy. And so it's just important that I put that out there. And so once again, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you listening.